So what is one of the main problems when we think of renewable energy? What's one of the main problems with, let's say, solar power or wind power?
Why do you always ask me these questions, Eric?
To put you on the spot.
What is the main problem?
Well, with solar. I mean, if you have solar power, what's one of the big issues with solar?
The big issues is sunny, not sunny days, and
right.
You don't
and with wind,
wind energy, you don't have access to the stuff you need to make their things work.
That's right. If you don't have
very technical explanation, stuff you need to make their things work.
That's right. If you don't have sun or wind, respectively, then neither of those renewables are going to work for you. So what we need is a free renewable, like the sun and the wind, but that's there all the time. And there are a few being worked on. Tidal power is one, for instance. But here's one that I'll bet no one out there has heard of. It's the power of evaporation.
Wow, okay.
The power of evaporation. And this is really cool. It is essentially using evaporation and water-responsive material to create mechanical movement, which then could be used to drive power generation equipment. So the research was discussed on Columbia University's website in the article, "Energy Harvested from Evaporation Could Power Much of the United States," which discusses research by Oscar Sahin, a biophysicist at Columbia, and others. Basically, it works like this, and this is really crazy.
Pretty far out there. Yep.
Water, you have some sort of material that absorbs moisture from the air. So, air evaporation, right? Absorbs it, and it expands. Now, as it loses that moisture to evaporation, it contracts. Now, this expansion and contraction can be converted to mechanical energy, and the rate of absorption and evaporation can be controlled by something even as simple as shutters, right? So, Sahin and his co-authors show this in a great video, and I'll explain a little bit of what we're seeing here. So, if we run that first clip. So in the first clip here, they put bacterial spores onto plastic strips. Now these spores grow about 40% from when they are dry to when they have absorbed moisture. And that expansion and contraction causes these strips to shorten or lengthen. Now, as you might imagine, there are a lot of ways to convert this to mechanical energy. One way, as we saw there, is to use those strips like a muscle, and that was the example that we saw there. So the way they have the strips, the way they have the spores attached to the strip causes those strips to either contract or expand, which is kind of like how muscle works, how it flexes and relaxes. Another is to use weight distribution to drive a wheel, like we'll see in this clip.
We have a wheel with a bunch of our spore samples around it. And half of our wheel is placed into a humid environment and half of it into a dry environment. Because our spores are expanding when humidity is high and contracting when humidity is low, that means you have a very tiny mass imbalance on the wheel, which causes it to push forward for as long as the humidity is high in one half and low in the other half.
Once you have a rotating device, you can use it for many interesting applications. You can maybe create a car. We connected the rotating circle to wheels, and the device started to move just like a toy car.
I was so excited.
Wow. You have the device here, it's not moving, it's not animated, it's dead. And then you feed it some water. And within seconds, it comes to life. It starts to animate.
You can do your physics calculations, but when you actually see it turning, it's a completely different thing. There's an invisible power that is going through it.
So that's a trip, and that's a real model. This is something they're doing in their lab. So imagine now that instead of a car, that mill wheel that we saw is turning a generator, which is creating electricity, right? And this is pretty exciting. So in the first evaluation of evaporation as a renewable energy source, these researchers estimated that U.S. lakes and reservoirs could generate about 325 gigawatts of power, which is nearly 70% of what the United States currently produces. Now, this is an ideal figure, and it depends on a couple things. Number one, it depends on the weather. It's evaporation. So if you live in areas that are really hot or are really humid and not a whole lot of evaporation going on, this is so in the west and the southwest, this would work. And also, they're also assuming that you completely cover the lake and the reservoir with the mechanism that does it. And obviously you wouldn't do that. But they are going to actually start experimenting with this on a smaller scale than in the lab, where they're actually going to take like a small pond or something like that, cover it. It's just really a trip. I mean, now, does it go anywhere? Who knows? Is it really economically feasible? I just think it was pretty darn cool.
Seeing that
and the other
listing.
thing, the other thing I got to touch on here a little bit, which makes this really neat, is that in a sense it can store energy. So what they do is they open the shutters. This material, this absorbent material, spores in this case, absorb the evaporation, absorb the moisture from the air. Then they close the shutters.
So it's just
that
waiting.
traps it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when they're ready to release the power, they open the shutters. The spores start to evaporate and shrink.
That smooths it.
And so you've basically got an energy storage device. It's a trip.
A little
I love
evaporation
it.
battery.
It's an evaporation battery. Exactly.
How cool
You got
is
it.
that? That is amazing.
And that's our little propeller head story
again,
for the day.
Again, what was the institution that was?
That was Columbia University.
Columbia,
In
right.
New York.
In
yeah.
New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great stuff. Great stuff there. All right. Thanks, Dirk.